All right. Today we are joined by Edale Lane, author of Atlantis, an excellent book, Land of Dreams. My name is Sean Barnhill, and I will be interviewing our author today. I got a few questions for you. I got them on my handy-dandy note card here, so I don't forget because I have a memory like a sieve. You categorize your book as historical fantasy or liminal fiction, but you write it as if it actually happened. What was your choice for that approach?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. Basically, that is the way that I approach all of my historical fantasy, historical fictions. I want them to be believable. I want people to read this and say, that's what really happened. And so I use that approach on purpose. My fantasy isn't like Marvel Comics. It's like, this could actually have happened. And if it did, this is the way it would have gone.
Very good. Okay, I like that. So there's a certain level of plausibility to your stories, and that helps people to, would you say, identify with them more?
That's the plan.
All right, perfect. Do you believe there was a real Atlantis?
I believe, after all of the research that I've done, stories I've heard my entire life, and looking logically at what has happened as a historian with a master's degree in history, that there were early civilizations before Egypt and before Mesopotamia and Sumer and before Greece, that went back way long ago. Now, whether they were Atlantis or not, I cannot tell you for a fact. But the evidence is clear. Let's look at it this way. All right, you have a brain. Modern man, what you would call anatomically modern humans, have been on this planet for at least 200,000 years with the same brain capacity, the same everything else that we have, ability for speech and thought and creativity for 200,000 years. Now, can you imagine that they just sat around hunting and gathering in caves and wearing animal skins and learning how to create fire for 195,000 of those years, and then suddenly decided, well, we're going to have civilization now? That's really unbelievable, in my opinion. When you go way back in time, even stone crumbles, and we would have no remnants, no recollection of those previous civilizations today, and very little evidence to find. But there is evidence that there could have been an island or a continent in the mid-Atlantic from which many ideas spread both east and west. And we see that in the pyramids. We see that in other monolithic structures. We see that in culture, in religious beliefs, in icons, in symbology. We see evidence of there being more connections. History tells us that, before the Phoenicians, nobody could have traveled very far away from the shore. They didn't have seagoing ships, but evidence in cultures around the world suggests that wasn't the case, that they did have connections with each other. We just don't know what they were.
Okay, how did you come up with the ideas for what happens in the novel?
Okay, thank you. Well, I did a lot of research, and I read everything available on Atlantis, from Plato all the way up through more modern things where people write about their past life experiences as an Atlantean. And I discovered that a lot of the evidence, if you want to call it that, in writing form, whether it was from Edgar Cayce or whoever, there's some contradictions. There's some little things that don't line up in everybody's account of Atlantis. So I just kind of put together the things that I felt were the most plausible and that were the most believable, and put them into the story. And as I was writing, I outlined everything, did all this world building in advance of starting to write. But as I wrote, I would dream the next scenes and then write them in the next day. So I kind of felt like I really got in touch with the ancient Atlantis vibe there, so that it kind of helped guide me in what to include and what not to include and how to represent the culture.
Awesome. All right. Okay. Next question is, some old movies depict that the destruction of Atlantis was caused by their own arrogance or perhaps a careless use of technology that they had, established for themselves. But you don't. Why do you think that might be?
Okay. Well, the first answer is that's already been done. So I'm all about doing something new and different. I don't want to copy someone else's vision. But when I read Plato, and I'm going to read this little passage from Timaeus and Critias. For many generations, they obeyed the laws and loved the divine to which they were akin. They reckoned that qualities of character were far more important than their present prosperity. So they bore the burden of their wealth and possessions lightly and did not let their high standard of living intoxicate them or make them lose self-control. Then later in the passage it says, "But when the divine element in them became weakened, and their human trials became predominant, they ceased to be able to carry their prosperity with moderation." Most people read that and think, oh, they gave up being good in order to pursue their own greedy desires. But I see that more as something happened to interrupt their spiritual connection with the other plane of existence, from which they gained a lot of their knowledge and power and stability. And they had ways of making their lands more prosperous. And so I looked at, maybe there was a physical reason, something that happened to do with the stars, something that happened to do with natural disasters, something that happened to do with the state and position of planet Earth in the galaxy at that time, that it kind of made a bunch of static between them and their source of knowledge and power. That was the interruption. I mean, you don't go along saying, oh, we can live 1,000 years, healthy lives, we're never sick, we never want for anything, we lack for nothing. Right. Let's give that all up so that we can, be greedy and lustful and do all these bad things, It doesn't make sense that they would consciously choose to do that when everything was going so well.
Right.
And then, just to do it overnight. There are some recording things from Plato that I had to address with a different perspective in mind in order to make this come out right. For example, one thing Plato wrote that makes no sense whatsoever. After telling us how much advanced they were and had flying machines and submarines and all these advanced technologies, he said, but when they attacked Athens, they were defeated by the Athenians, and the gods of Athens were angry with them, and that's what caused their destruction. Okay, it's totally illogical that if they were that much more powerful than the Greeks, how did they then be defeated by the Greeks? So I kind of addressed that with just this one little faction of people who were scared and wanted to have somewhere to go, took their ships and attacked Greece on their own, away and apart from the rest of the Atlanteans, and that's how they were able to be defeated. And that their technology failed because they were so far away from their home base where the source of their power lay. So, I put it more of there were all these different factors involved. And of course, when you are told that the world is ending, people have a tendency to panic. And so maybe some of them are going to do something a little reckless. But that's how I approached that.
All right. Just a couple more here. Did writing within the realm of theoretical fiction prove to be more liberating creatively than sticking to more concrete histories?
Well, one reason that I chose the 5 and 600s to set my Viking series is that there's very little recorded history from that part. Yes, when you are working with a set of this is exactly what happened, and this is who was king, and this is what happened in this year, and this war was fought here, and this is who won, you really kind of have to stick within that framework. But the farther back you go, the less of that there is. And when you go back 11,000 years, there's really not much of anything. So you can pretty much make up whatever you want. That being said, I'm not writing Marvel Comics here, so I'm wanting it to be as realistic as possible. So I based my Atlantis off of the ancient Egyptian and Greek cultures and civilizations that we know of, stretching back 8,000-9,000 years, and with Atlantis possibly being a starting point for those cultures to have grown from. I used that and engineered it backwards for their society.
Awesome. All right, and finally, so Atlantis Land of Dreams is your largest work to date.
600 pages.
600 pages. How was the experience of writing such a large tome? And do you think that you may ever approach doing something like that again?
Well, would I approach doing it again? Depends on whether or not the inspiration just drops into my brain and says, you must write this. And as I go about doing it, it gets longer and longer. But I knew Atlantis would be long because it is an epic, and it goes through first establishing the civilization and the world building, and then presenting the problems, and then working towards solving the problems, and then what to do if the problems can't be solved. There was just so much in this to approach. So yes, it was quite different. And the first thing that was different is how long it took. Typically, I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but I'm a full-time writer right now, and typically it takes me approximately 2 months from start to publication of a book.
I think that's impressive.
It took me, about a month's worth of research before I ever started writing. I was finishing up Cold and Murder while I was doing that research for Atlantis, because I knew that was going to be coming next. And then after about a month's worth of research, it was about a week of world building and planning and storyboarding and all of that, coming up with all the list of characters and their descriptions. And then it took about 2 months to write because it's very long. Yep. And then the editing process is where it really got slowed down, because I hired a number of professionals to help me make sure this was the best it could be. I did create the cover, but I did have to wait a little time on my editing services. And so it was not published until the middle of July. So it took about 6 months total to complete this book. So it did take a lot longer than others. In the meantime, I wrote 2 more. So I wasn't just sitting around twiddling my thumbs while it was off to the editors. Yeah, it was a long project, but I think it's well worth it. And I want you to check this out.
All right. And so I'm sure your fans are actually going to love the fact that it is such a large book. It's got a beautiful cover. And Atlantis, Land of Dreams, where can everybody find it?
Okay, you can get it at Amazon. It is in hardcover, paperback, and ebook currently. It is available in all Amazon markets, but not all Amazon markets carry the hardcover. It has pictures and images and maps and tables and charts, and it has all the goodies that you expect from a fantasy book. So, yeah, but it's available from Amazon or from me if you're local, because it costs the earth to mail anything from Canada to anywhere else in the world.
All right, well, thank you very much. Edale Lane, everybody. Atlantis Land of Dreams. Find it on Amazon. Get yours today.